Hello and welcome to Journey Through Sci-Fi. Today we have a very special bonus episode for you all. We are looking at Terminator Dark Fate, which has just recently been released in cinemas in the UK. So I'm very excited to talk about this one. I'm literally on the edge of my seat to find out what you've made of this, Matt. Because I know when we had a great chat about Terminator 1 and 2 in one of our previous podcast episodes.
Yep.
And we loved both of those.
Yeah, it was good to go back to them. Yep.
So I'm really interested to see what you think of Terminator Dark Fate.
Sure.
There will be plenty of spoilers, so do be warned. If you haven't seen this film yet, get a cinema ticket, go out and watch it, and then come back and find out what we think.
Talk fast.
You first.
My name is Sarah Connor. August 29, 1997. It was supposed to be Judgment Day. But I changed the future. Saved 3 billion lives. Enough of a resume for you?
No. You may have changed the future, but you didn't change our fate.
Okay, so Matt, the moment of truth. First, opinions on Terminator Dark Fate.
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Pretty good film, right?
That is a good reaction from you. I was hoping I would feel at least that.
You're sitting in the cinema thinking, oh, Matt's going to bloody hate this.
I was like, I don't know. Will he like it?
Why did you think that?
I don't know, because I've read reviews since, and some people, it's polarized a lot of people. Some people hate it and are just like, it's tainted it. But I really enjoyed it, and I'll tell you exactly why I enjoyed it throughout the episode.
Good. Okay, right. I'm looking forward to hearing that. I thought it was pretty good. And I've been kind of umming and ahhing about it since. I definitely really enjoyed it throughout most of the time I was sitting in the cinema watching it. And then in the week since, I've kind of been like, oh, was that good or was that shit? Yeah. So I'm wondering if this conversation is going to bring me back around to sort of...
Well, fingers crossed, because I definitely got swept away with it all.
Yeah.
Like I usually say, I'm quite easily led when it comes to films. If it's got a sort of good structure, I'm away. I'm in it.
Yeah.
And I felt like that throughout this film.
Yeah, it's very well paced. I think we can categorically say it's the best Terminator film since Terminator 2.
Oh, easily.
But that's a really low bar, right?
And so you said previously when we talked about this that you were going to go and watch the next Terminator Genesis.
Yeah, it came up in my Netflix recommendations. So 2 or 3 days before I watched Dark Fate, I watched Genesis. And another reason why I'm not sure about how I feel about Dark Fate is I've kind of got the two of them mixed up in my head now.
Oh, no.
Because there's massive similarities.
There are, yeah.
Arnie's playing roughly the same character. So spoilers for Genesis, the main Terminator in that is John Connor.
Oh, God.
So, wait, am I getting this right?
Are you thinking of Salvation?
No, John Connor's a human in Salvation, and then his mate is a Terminator hybrid, but I haven't seen that since it came out, and that's all I can remember.
Same.
All I can remember from that is when Christian Bale went mad on set, and I just always think of that. Oh, what the fuck is up with you? I love that.
Oh, I remember that video. It went crazy, didn't it?
Yeah, I absolutely love that.
Went viral everywhere.
With his weird, half part Welsh, part English, part LA accent he's got. No, Genesis, John Connor gets infected with some kind of mad Skynet nanite poison thing that turns him into this super advanced Terminator. Yeah, it's the classic. It's the original plot. Kyle Reese is being sent back in time to protect Sarah Connor from the T-800. As he's being sent back in time, Skynet interferes, turns John Connor into this Terminator thing, messes everything up. There's T-1000s in the past. There's the T-800 gets killed immediately by old Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the whole timeline gets messed up from there. And it gets weirder and it gets stupider.
So on the topic of sequels as well, so how many sequels have there been before Dark Fate?
Sequels 4. So this is the 6th one.
The sixth sequel, is it?
6th film.
The sixth film, that's mad. And then there was there was Terminator 1, Terminator 2, the good ones.
Yep.
Terminator 3.
Terminator 3, which is just sort of forgettable.
Terminator Genesis.
No, Salvation before
Terminator
Genesis.
Salvation, Terminator Genesis, and then
Dark Fate.
Yes, that's why I was getting confused, because it's Khaleesi who's in Terminator Genesis.
Yeah, she's Sarah Connor.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting point, because part of what makes this film good, this new one, obviously, is Linda Hamilton coming back to the role. And I think they've always kind of, they've held on to, well, they brought Arnie back for Genesis, and he's pretty good in that. You know, it's a bit of a silly film, but it's quite fun to see him as the older protector Terminator. And you realise how crucial he is to the franchise. And seeing Linda Hamilton back on screen being tough and old and miserable reminds you of like what an integral part of that franchise she is. The Connors and the Arnold Schwarzenegger T-800, it's not just Skynet, it has to be those actors, right?
Yeah, and it melds the two in this really nicely. It's like the older and the newer generations. But yeah, so there's lots of sequels beforehand. There was the Sarah Connor Chronicles as well.
Yeah, did you watch that?
I watched like the first series.
Watched a couple of episodes.
People do rave about it.
Yeah,
it was Summer Glau, wasn't it, who was in it? And so there's so much like extra potential kind of canon in this, but it's all been axed, and we're starting from scratch from Terminator 2, and here we are with Terminator Dark Fate.
Yeah, it's a bit like the Star Wars extended universe getting canned, but this sort of franchise works very well as a alternate timeline storyline franchise.
Yeah, you can sort of rewrite it, can't you, when you want?
Yeah, and the way the plot of Dark Fate plays out really reminds you that the whole thing can have a reset button every 10 to 15 years should the studio need it, and I'm sure they will try that again, you know, many years from now when Linda Hamilton and Arnold Schwarzenegger aren't available anymore. They will try again and again. And
they'll
again.
have to try and switch it up again, won't they?
Yeah. Which I don't think will work after such time that those two actors are, you know, not working anymore or not around anymore.
Yeah.
That will be the final nail in this franchise. I think there will always be potential legs in it if those two actors, you know, want to be involved.
Yeah, because I think this really cashes in on the nostalgia factor, and there's lots of elements which make you think of the original two. And that's what I liked about it, because it kept me thinking about the original two. And I don't know if it was too much in retrospect, but some of the moments I liked were the subtle references to other stuff, which we'll go into a bit more detail as we go on. But let's talk a bit about the director first. So it's Tim Miller, who directed Deadpool. And obviously they've got James Cameron back doing the writing for this.
Yeah, and quite heavily involved from what I've read. Not directing it, obviously, but in terms of developing the story and just kind of hand on the shoulder, it sounds a little bit, with Tim Miller.
Yeah, because we've... so I showed you an extract from this book by James Cameron. It's called Story of Science Fiction. And there's a bit in there about where he's asked the question, how would you do another Terminator film if it were to come up? And he sort of talks a bit about that in the book, doesn't he?
Mm. Yeah, he certainly talks about, he's got an interest in current military technology and how close that is to the things that Terminator was predicting, drones, and giving a drone autonomy and kill authority of its own, and what a terrifying possibility that might be. But also he talks about it in quite pragmatic terms, in that that's terrifying, but it's the way it would go, because there are realistic applications that the military would need and want from a robot that is autonomously able to kill.
Yeah, that's it. And sort of like the slavery aspect as well, as we've discussed in previous episodes. He goes into that, and sort of like basically what these scientists want to make is a bunch of human-like slaves.
Or more intelligent even than humans.
Yeah, just to sort of do their bidding.
Yeah.
Which is mad.
Yeah.
And yeah, totally impractical, because as Skynet would prove, and this is the thing as well, things like Skynet and So the Skynet syndrome and the Terminator syndrome are things that are actually actively discussed now at DARPA, which is like the Defense Advanced Research
They use that
Agency.
terminology.
Yeah, they use that terminology based on the first two Terminator films. Again, crazy to see the impact of those films.
Good that hopefully they are thinking about it in the right terms. Syndrome, not a good thing. So hopefully they've got their eye on the ball.
Yeah, let's try and avoid this. Yeah. But also, what James Cameron says in the book as well. He talks a bit about so what he says is the best attributes that the human race sort of have is that we're inventive, and he uses the term "we can science the shit out of this." So I think that's great because that's if we can science the shit out of something to solve the problem, and that's kind of what works in this a little bit because you're seeing humans fight against these new Terminators in a different way.
How so?
The synchronization stuff.
Okay, sure.
So they've got, in this one, they make a big thing about human augmentation.
Yeah. So Grace, who is the Kyle Reese figure of this film. So we should say that plot-wise, and I would say this is one of the big downsides of the film, but also, it kind of helps. The plot is just the plot of the first Terminator film, right?
Pretty much.
We've got a future savior of mankind and a Terminator sent back to kill them, and a human resistance fighter is sent back to protect them. And it incorporates some Terminator 2 stuff because we've got a friendly Terminator on side, which is Arnie. But broadly speaking, the plot of this film is it's a young girl with no combat training who's being pursued by a Terminator and being protected by a human.
Yeah, that's basically sort of the ins and outs of it. But it does play with your expectations as to what you would expect to happen. I mean, the opening scene.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so spoiler, absolute spoiler. The opening scene, John Connor is killed.
Yeah, and it's really well done CGI-wise, as in they've used sort of digital makeup for John and Sarah, and a new different T-800 as well, all to look like circa 1992, 93, Arnie, Linda Hamilton and Edward Furlong. Yeah,
and it was something I just didn't expect. It just came straight away in the first scene. They've killed John Connor. What the hell's going to happen now?
Yeah.
And it's just Sarah Connor roaming around, presumably. So yes, they do that in the first opening moments. So again, you think as it's a continuation, John Connor's going to be some sort of role in it. But no, they just axe all of that. And then they bring about this sort of like new kind of rehashed version of the Terminator story.
Yeah, with a different sort of team of resistance fighters from the future and stuff.
Yeah. And so what they're doing with that as well is they're saying basically if Skynet doesn't happen, something else will happen. So even though you've stopped Judgment Day, where it's going to happen anyway somehow because that's just inevitable.
Yeah, which is interesting because the catchphrase of these films is there's no fate but what we make for ourselves. But actually, they're very clear about the fact that fate kind of is written for this world, isn't it? There is always going to be a judgment day and things kind of come out of the wash exactly the same. There's a nuclear holocaust, machines rise up and hunt us almost to extinction and then we fight back. All the terminology is different. Skynet was defeated. It's gone. It doesn't exist in this timeline. Everything's completely different. There's no John Connor, but still the future has the exact same shape to it. It's 20, 30 years further down the line than the original timeline, but everything's playing out exactly the same. Like you said, there's differences though. The way they fight, they've kind of adapted their bodies, which kind of fits more into a 2019 sci-fi film.
Yeah, so they've like got the human augmentation aspect of it, but also they're saying it's still going to happen, but things are different now. And the way things are different are the sort of the gender roles as well. So like that's a really big thing in this film. All of the most powerful characters are women, and they sort of like hammer that home right from the start. So the lead character, or the sort of like who turns out to be sort of the new John Connor. So Dani Ramos, who's played by Natalia Reyes. So she's the new John Connor basically in this. And from the offset, she's a stronger character. So if you compare her to Sarah Connor in the first Terminator, she's like a weak waitress, and then you see this transformation. With this character of Dani, she's already quite clued up. You see her in the first opening scene, and she's looking after her family. She's sort of getting breakfast ready for the dad. She's making sure her brother's up. So she's not this sort of like weak little girl that Sarah Connor is in the first one. At least it doesn't seem that way. But they kind of play that down. But there's lots of little clues throughout. And I think it's quite easy to pick up on, because there's another moment quite soon after when she's so it's great because she works at a steel factory, and a steel factory is where the first Terminator is killed. So again, that's a nice little sort of homage to the first film.
It's a car plant, isn't it?
Yeah, it's something to do with steel. I mean, I saw lots of metal around. It's a car plant, so it's like manufacturing stuff, isn't it? So it's
yeah, and her brother or her dad, no, her brother has been replaced by a machine in that first scene, hasn't he?
Yeah, and she's trying to persuade the boss to be like, no, keep my brother on. I know he's a bit of a loser, but it's okay.
Yeah, she's taking charge, and that kind of plays through the whole film. So I see what you mean about, I don't think Sarah Connor's that weak. She's sort of maybe physically weak in the first Terminator film, but she's not without her own agency. Mm-hmm. But Dani is a lot more, she has like leadership qualities, like definite, visible, upfront. She's really confident.
Yeah. But then there's a difference between, so Dani is supposed to be like the new John Connor.
Yeah.
Whereas Sarah Connor is a different kind of, she's from like a different generation, isn't she? So she's always going to have that sort of slight difference in where she's at in leadership and things like that.
Yeah. It was more forced on Sarah through circumstance, where you can see a trajectory for Dani where she was always going to be like a big figure. And it's very clear. There's a scene where like she wants training on how to use the guns and stuff when they meet up with Carl later on, instead of, Kyle Reese putting a gun in Sarah Connor's hand and telling her this is what you've got to do. She's like, no, teach me how to use these weapons. So she has a bit more, she takes the lead on things. Yeah,
and there's a moment when the new Terminator, the Rev 9, played by Gabrielle Luna, he's coming after them when they're in the helicopter, and she doesn't want to leave Sarah behind, so she just grabs a gun and starts shooting, like straight off the bat. And that's not like a weak, timid little girl kind of thing to do. She just does that straight away. So in the future, she's the leader of the resistance, isn't she? And that's why they've been sent back. I did find it a bit frustrating that Sarah assumes that Dani's going to give birth to the leader of resistance. Yes, that's the main play of the film, isn't it? Yeah, I found it a little bit frustrating because it was fairly obvious from the get-go that wasn't the case, just from the reactions of Grace and all that. And even Sarah, there's a moment when Dani's asleep on Grace, and then Sarah looks at her, and it's kind of like she's looking at her a bit sort of puzzled, like, okay, maybe she's not, I don't know if that's meant to be like that, but that's kind of what I got from that scene. I think also just like the fact that Sarah has that line of dialogue to say, you must give birth to the leader of the resistance was too on the nose, because as soon as she said it, it was like, well, obviously that's not the case, otherwise that line wouldn't be in it. Yeah, she says it's your womb. Yeah, your womb is the problem. And as soon as they had that conversation, you're like, well, okay, obviously Dani's not the mother, she's the savior herself, and we've just got to wait for this little bit to play out. Yeah, I mean, it's very, like, it's on the nose with all that kind of stuff, but I still kind of enjoyed that little flip, even though you could see it coming. You know it's going to come. It's just when these older characters from this different generation where things were different, and Sarah was the one who was going to give birth to the savior of mankind. Yeah. Whereas now in 2019, it could be a woman. And when that's kind of revealed, Sarah's reaction is really good, because she's like, you're John, she's John. And it's just a very nice character moment for Sarah, that she's still, just the sort of psychological trauma that she's been through. She's still obsessed with this future narrative that she built her whole life around, and she's seeing the new John Connor, and she's got a lot of emotions invested in meeting someone who's got that fate lined up for them. So what did you think of like Sarah Connor coming back as well? Because I know you're a big fan of seeing protagonists from different films come back and they've lived a life and they're a bit sort of rugged. So you talked about Mad Max previously.
Yeah. And it's exactly what I would have wanted from this kind of a film. She's amazing in it. It's the perfect extension of that Sarah Connor character. She's great in the first film. She's very fragile. Linda Hamilton, as a performer, goes through that incredible physical transformation to be Sarah Connor in the second film. And it's that really tough, scary, locked up in a mental asylum character. What happens to her when she's just like let loose on the world and completely directionless and just drinking and miserable and grieving. And she carries it all amazingly.
Yeah.
And she hasn't acted, right, in ages. She's been
I haven't seen her in anything like recently.
Incredible to come back and give a performance like that. And it's like you said, what I would have wanted from a Mad Max film with Mel Gibson. It was that perfect continuity of character and a real testament to her skill as an actor to come back to a role 25 years later, is it?
It's probably about that, isn't it?
It's about that. About 25 years later, come back to the role and have just be completely convincing that you know what's been going through Sarah's mind for 25 years, 20 years.
And like the scene in which she first comes on screen as like the older Sarah Connor is amazing.
Yeah.
Like they've got the Rev 9. So the Rev 9 is like an interesting sort of design, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But the first thing you see is Sarah Connor comes out of her car with a big fuck off gun.
Yeah, like a rocket launcher, shotgun, Tommy gun combined into one, right?
And she's like not flinching or anything.
Yeah.
She just fires it at one of them, fires it at the other one. One goes flying off of this bridge, and then she looks over and she takes the pin out of a grenade, drops it, and then says, "I'll be back."
Yeah.
And I'm like,
got
yes!
a big laugh in the cinema. That
It's so good. And then the other...
I wanted her to say, "Come with me if you want to live."
Yeah, that would have been good. But then no, because Grace had already said that.
Yeah.
In the
I think it would have been better if Sarah said that. Does Sarah ever say that?
I don't know if she does.
No, because Kyle says
Arnie
it to
says
her,
it.
and then Arnie says
Yeah.
it to her. So maybe it only works if people say it to her.
Yeah, but then Grace is supposed to be the person who's... Yeah. And then, but they all say, so Grace and Danny say, "What is that?" They don't say, "Who is that?" They go, "What is that?" What is this thing that's come in and just destroyed these Terminators?
Yeah, and because Grace has got no idea about Sarah, that Sarah's a bit of a spanner in the works to Grace's plan for saving Danny, which is before we get all the exposition about Legion instead of Skynet and we don't have a John Connor and all of that, you are a bit like, oh, what's going on? She doesn't recognise Sarah Connor. I assumed when Sarah Connor showed up, Grace would say something like, "That's Sarah Connor, badass Terminator killer. We know all about her in the future."
Yeah, no one knows anymore, which is, craziness.
My name is Sarah Connor. When I was about her age, a Terminator was sent to kill me, to stop the birth of my son, John, leader of the Resistance. We changed the future, saved 3 billion lives. You're welcome.
When Grace and the Rev 9 turn up, so we talked about in the first two films how there's the moment when they transport from the future into the past, and they do that sort of like Adonis pose. So when Grace does hers, she goes into a bridge, doesn't she?
Yeah, she materializes halfway through a bridge and then just plummets to the ground, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Which is how Kyle Reese shows up, isn't she? Kind of lands on her side very uncomfortably, which is what happens to Reese, I think.
Yeah, so they're already making it look... So, again, the playing with expectations thing. They make it... If you hadn't seen the trailer for this, you wouldn't know who our character is.
But you know, if you've seen the first two, you know she's the good one,
Yeah.
I would say.
But then it's the moment where she comes out of the river and she's taken by like the two people, and then the police show up, and then suddenly she does all this kick-ass like martial arts or whatever, and you can tell then that she's a Terminator because you get that view, and then at that point you're like, oh, is she or isn't she? And there's no sort of clear answer at that point.
Yeah, I assumed she was a reprogrammed, so Arnie from the second film type of savior.
Yeah, because they've already established that she's like got that kind of more human side because she's not.
I knew she was going to be the good one. There was never any doubt about that. And when we see the Rev 9, he's obviously more menacing. He's doing like a Robert Patrick T1000 performance. He's menacing, but also kind of cocky.
And he's kind of showing him he's more of an infiltrator again, like the infiltrator style of a Terminator, because he says something to the woman. He doesn't just sort of not say anything and just walk off.
Yeah,
he says something like a funny line or something, doesn't he?
I know that's later in the film. He apologizes for like causing some damage or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a bit of a kind of almost humorous personality.
Yeah, definitely. You can see that in his character.
So what's the deal with the Rev 9? I didn't... It's not the best Terminator design.
Oh, I really liked it.
It didn't feel like revolutionary enough for me.
Yeah.
I don't know what more you can do, but what is the Rev 9? He's basically a T1000 wrapped around a T800.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
That's kind of it, yeah, because there's two of them, aren't there? So in my head, it was kind of like they've taken both models and then they've put them together and then they've become like a team.
Yeah.
So I quite like that.
So it can do more... Is it supposed to be like stronger than a T1000 because it's got like a really bulky exoskeleton and endoskeleton underneath? Or?
Yeah, I think it can just do more, and it's more like a group. So it's not just sending one Terminator. You're basically sending two Terminators after them.
Well, just send two.
But then it's not as cool, is it, Matt? Come on now.
It just felt a bit style over substance. And I know you could say that about the T1000, but it was so like revolutionary that, he can shapeshift, he can look like anyone, he can turn into blades. It didn't quite feel the same level of, he splits in half. Like,
Yeah.
Didn't do it for me.
Okay, I can see what you mean, but I still thought it was cool.
It was cool. There were cool,
And
cool effects.
He was black this time. It's more menacing.
Yeah.
It's got the weird sort of tar now instead of the mercury look.
I like the design of the head.
Yeah, like the half head.
Yeah, he's got, again, it didn't make any sense, but it looked cool. It looked scary.
As long as it looked cool, I was fine. But yeah, so the style over substance thing, is that a Tim Miller thing, do you feel? So have you seen Deadpool?
Yeah, I've seen Deadpool. He didn't do the second Deadpool, did he?
Don't think so.
Yeah, I've seen Deadpool. I didn't feel the links. I wasn't sitting there being like, this totally feels like the same director as Deadpool. He handles some humor, and it's a violent action film. But I don't know if I'm just sort of looking for similarities where there might not be there.
I felt like the action seemed very sort of like his kind of style.
Like what in particular? Because I didn't.
Well, there was one bit in particular. Well, there was one bit where the Rev 9 is cutting through all those people, and it was like the Deadpool kind of two swords kind of thing.
Yeah,
and like flipping around, and then all of the fight scenes, they were like using different elements of what was around them, like the one in the factory with Grace. I felt like that was very sort of like, and the Rev 9's leaping around, and it seemed sort of like quite superhero-y.
Yeah, fair enough. Now you say that, I do agree. The reason I didn't was that there's a big action scene towards the end that maybe we'll come to a bit later that didn't feel like Deadpool. But I think you're absolutely right. It's quite well-directed action in those one-on-one fight scenes where it's Grace versus the Rev 9 and even Arnie versus the Rev 9 a couple of times. Feels a bit like that, doesn't it?
Yeah. Like I really got into the action scenes, and I'm usually if there's an action scene in a film and it's like a big car chase or something, I will zone out and I will just forget what's happening. And then suddenly I'll be like, oh no, I'm not paying attention. But for some reason with this, I was in it and I was sort of like paying attention to what was going on the whole time.
Okay. Yeah, and I agree. And that is a sign of good direction. But then I do want to jump ahead now and talk about the big action scene at the end then, because in terms of the action in the film, that was my big takeaway, and I hated it. There's a bloody act, it takes up like most of the end of the film, where they hijack a giant military plane, they get in like a plane on plane fight, then they're fighting in the plane's going down for like 10 minutes and they're all fighting each other. And then a Humvee crashes in a river under a dam, and there's an extended fight scene underwater on the riverbed. And all of that, it must have been like, 15, 20 minutes of the film? I thought it was terrible.
Yeah, it was a bit overkill. I'll say that. I didn't like the car coming from the plane. I didn't like that bit.
That was dumb. And then the car goes underwater and they're all fine.
And it's kind of like they just keep amping it up. And then, but I liked it when it went into the actual sort of like the dam itself, and they were all fighting together to defeat the Rev 9.
Afterwards, that was really cool.
Like, that
as a
scene,
climax.
that bit seemed a bit
too much of it.
It was a lot.
Apparently, that was James Cameron's idea. He had like a whole list of cool shit that he's been wanting to put in a film, and he's never found a place for it. I don't know if the plane bit is, but the fighting underwater. And I can totally see the appeal of having two Terminators fighting at the bottom of a, rapid river.
Yeah.
But having the human characters down there is like, well, they just die in like seconds. It's a torrent under there. But more than any of that stuff, the thing that bothered me was you couldn't tell what was going on.
It was really sort of like haphazard, wasn't it?
Really badly put together. So you're absolutely right. You've reminded me of some great action scenes in the front half of the movie. But my takeaway when I was thinking about, well, what's Deadpool-y about that? Certainly not that plane crash and that underwater scene, because that's really badly put together.
Yeah, it did kind of lose its way a bit when it did all of that. But then if James Cameron was the one who wanted to do it, it's because he loves water again, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's like, it's a cool idea that he had, but maybe there's a reason he hasn't found a way to fit this into a movie for 25 years.
Yeah.
Because it's mad.
I mean, I like the idea of the sort of Rev 9 sort of being all liquid in the water and that kind of thing.
Was he? I couldn't tell. I couldn't see what was going on.
It was kind of, it was very, you couldn't fully focus on any of it. But yeah, there was one bit and it was kind of like, how like sand moves in the sea and that kind of thing. So it was doing that kind of
that
stuff.
Sounds like a James Cameron idea as well. Like,
Yeah.
what if the character was made of sand and underwater and metal?
But it was the moment when Sarah Connor and Danny were in the vehicle.
Yeah.
And then they pull the parachute at the right time, and it's sort of just it
Oh,
does
to
go a bit
tangle up
crazy.
the Rev
But then it made up for it with the next bit for me. It was
the
fine.
next bit was cool.
Yeah.
But sorry for jumping ahead, but I did.
No,
want to talk about
it's
that.
good to get that out and get it off your chest, Matt.
Because it was the main thing that I didn't like about the film, and it lasted a really long time. So I overall sort of downsides of the film with those two action sequences, and the fact that the basic plot is very much a rehash. But there's a lot to love. in
Yeah.
there.
So shall we talk a little bit about the updated version of the present? So they make a big thing about the present day and the technology of the present day. So obviously we talked about the technology aspect in Terminator and Terminator 2 when we had a chat about that. So with this, obviously since those films, mobile phones have become a massive thing. Everyone's got a mobile phone.
Yeah.
Everyone could be tracked. And they make a big thing about that and how easy it is for the Terminator to track people in this. What did you think of the way they put that together?
Yeah, it was good, and I think it was well handled. Again, it's a big theme in Genesis. And again, it's
okay.
part of the reason I got it confused. So Genesis is a new operating system which is going to take over the world. It's a big release that's about to happen. And I can't remember if it's going to become Skynet or because John Connor's bad and come back from the future, it's going to replace Skynet, something like that. But it's going to take control of all devices at once. But in Genesis, it's very, very on the nose. It's like, oh, everyone's on their bloody phones these days. But it's done a lot better in Dark Fate because it's more about surveillance and tracking, and we don't sort of see a lot of the phones or whatever. In fact, there's kind of a joke in it that Sarah keeps her phone in a bag of crisps with like a twisty tie because she thinks it stops her from being tracked, which I think it does, doesn't it? But she gets
the phone out, doesn't
because
she?
she keeps getting out to use it. So it's like, well, when you take it out, we'll track you. It was good and it was sort of relevant. There's some on the nose stuff. The drones.
Yeah, let's pull the drones out because there's loads of drones everywhere. But yeah, I liked because the thing about Terminator 2 is they had that moment where they went off into the desert and then they knew that the is it the T-1000 in that one?
T2, yeah.
So they had the one. So they had the T-1000 in Terminator 2, and he couldn't track them for ages in the film. And there was a big part of the film where they were just sort of like in the desert having a bit of a lovely time, but it wasn't really that lovely. But yeah, with this, it felt like there could be no downtime because the Rev 9 can track you using all of the surveillance cameras, and any sort of CCTV you walk past or any drone which happens to be available. And they do that moment where the Rev 9 sort of like sinks into the wiring. And it reminded me a bit of Ghost in the Shell because he sort of like plucked out loads of different fingers all of a sudden and then, was just hacking into it.
And he plugs himself in and he can see every security camera and download it all and do facial scans and all of that. I thought that was quite good.
And because specifically Legion, which is what the new Skynet is meant to be a military-based AI, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't remember, what's the backstory they give for Legion when Grace is explaining it?
So they said that Legion was created for cyber warfare.
Cyber warfare.
Yeah. So that was the big thing. And Grace goes into the backstory about what happened on the first day and the second day.
I think they lose control of it or something, right?
Yeah.
I can't remember the first day thing. Second day is humans launch nukes to try and stop it.
Yeah, so the first day, all of the it was like a day the Earth stood still moment.
Yeah.
And they see like a plane falling down out of the sky. And then, the second day they launched the nukes.
Yeah, but the humans launched the nukes, which is interesting. It's not, I think that's what she says.
Yeah.
It's not actually like an attack by Legion at that point.
And then the third day...
I thought by the third day they were just being hunted by Legion.
Yeah, so the third day they start getting hunted, don't they?
Yeah, hunting down whoever's left.
Yeah, and they're just scavengers around in this sort of post-apocalyptic world.
Who we find out that Danny kind of unites and acts as a leader for and creates this new resistance.
Yeah, because they all feel like they can't win against this AI because it's too powerful.
To the point where they're turning on each other and killing each other and robbing each other.
Yeah. But then, she unites them all and they start fighting together. And then there's other flashbacks we see when they're sort of fighting more as a unit. And it's quite like, I quite liked some of the future sort of like flash forwards.
Yeah. And not as good as the T2 flash forwards or the T1. But yeah, it was cool. It was a cool world. It had a similar feel to it. The kind of scrappiness felt very authentic to the original stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And it's sort of the same kind of world, isn't it?
Yeah. But it was like dialed up to 11, wasn't it? Because you see them fighting Rev 9s in the future and they're all like stomping around like big spiky octopuses or whatever.
Yeah. And at that point, they're definitely not like human looking. They're just like got weird tendrils everywhere and when they're attacking.
Yeah.
There's no warning. Everything just stops. They told us, wait until things go back to normal. The normal was never coming back.
So we haven't even talked about Carl yet. And
Carl. Let's talk about Carl.
and maybe that's appropriate because it felt like ages before he showed up.
Yeah.
Right?
Because, but you kind of knew who's going to be. So
again, another frustrating thing where you kind of know what's coming and you're a bit like, can we just get to it? Like, because Sarah's getting these mysterious text messages saying, go to Mexico City at this time for John. And when she gets those messages, she goes there and a Terminator showed up and she kills it. And you know who's sending the messages. But
there's only one possible answer.
Yeah.
It's got to be this guy called Carl.
Yeah. It's our old friend Carl. So we go to see him and Sarah instantly recognizes him, tried to kill him. And Grace is like, what are you doing? Leave him alone. But it's a very interesting new take on that character, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've had all these different T800s. We've had about 4 or 5 T800 characters. They've all got kind of a similar core and we see these different takes on what their personality becomes. So yeah, he's going by the name Carl now, right? And
Carl, and he's got a drapes business, hasn't he?
Yeah.
So he's in the drapes business.
So he's specifically explained as the same Terminator that we see at the start of the film, the one that shoots John dead. Even though, and that's very important, obviously. We know that there were, I think Sarah says there were loads of Terminators, right? When the T-1000 came back, so did several other Terminators that look like Arnie. And one of them happened to get John, and that one happens to now be living this life as Carl in Texas.
Carl in Texas. And so Carl's got a wife.
Well, they're a bit... Are they married?
Yeah. Well, he's got a partner.
He's got a family.
Yeah, he's got a family.
Definitely a family. He's kind of adopted.
He's living with a woman.
Yeah.
They've got a kid. Then it's not his kids.
Yeah.
So they go into the backstory of that, and what happened was this woman was in a abusive relationship, and basically he meets Arnie, and then she like falls in love with him, kind of.
No, I don't think so.
It's more like that he's a protector.
Yeah.
Which is ironic.
He's quite explicit about that, well, he says that their relationship's not physical.
Yep.
She appreciated the fact that I can change diapers very well, very efficiently, and I have a good sense of humour.
It's a bit of a cringe line.
I liked it. Another big laugh in the cinema. Just me, when I say a big laugh, I mean I laughed really loudly on my own. No, I did quite like it. Yeah, he killed John, and then we have to imagine this whole sort of scenario for him where, it was like the last order he was given by Skynet. Skynet doesn't even exist in the future anymore, but I'm not sure if that has any effect on him. He's just importantly, an infiltrator, hunter-killer robot that now has no mission, no purpose is how he calls it. I think the infiltrator aspect of that is really important for what happens to him next, because I think you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit and take a bit of a leap of faith in terms of what he did. He just decides to continue as normal. He infiltrates human society. He gets a job, like you said, starts a drapes business and just kind of starts to live a normal life for no particular reason.
Yeah, he just sort of like falls into it, doesn't he?
Yeah, but he cannot self-terminate, right?
Yeah.
So it's either go around killing humans because that's what he was built for, but he doesn't actually have that specific order to do that. So he has no
he only
orders.
had one target, didn't he?
Yeah, and he's built to infiltrate. He's built to convince people he's a real human.
Yeah.
So it kind of worked. How did you feel about that? Did you have to take that leap of faith?
I thought it was really silly. I was enjoying all the other stuff with like Grace and Sarah Connor and Danny, and I quite liked them as a little trio. And then Arnie came in, and like I love Arnie, and it was just something about this idea that his character had just done this because that's all he had to do. By doing that, he learnt about what humans are like, and then sort of built a connection with them. And he says like he can't love like humans can, but he does feel something.
I can't remember how he phrases it. I think Danny asked them when they're leaving his family's home. Danny says something like, "Do you love them?" And he says, "Not in the way a human could."
Yeah.
Which and then what did he say? He says, "Which I used to think was a good thing, but now I'm not so sure." I think he says.
Yeah. It's very problematic, isn't it? Because it's a machine which has been created to kill one target, and it is an infiltrator, so I can see that aspect of it. But would that be the next thing it would do? It would just... Yeah, I don't know. I'm not 100% sold on it, but I can see why they put it in, because it's funny.
Funny, and it makes him a more relatable character, which is really important, because he's not a reprogrammed Terminator. We've seen lots of reprogrammed Terminators, but I don't know. It worked for me because, you've got...
But they made such a thing in Terminator 2 where he had to switch his learning capabilities on. So did he switch his learning chip on?
So, yeah, presumably not. But that kind of... Oh, yeah, you're right.
See, that would be my main...
But what's Carl learned? I guess he's not...
Learn how to do diapers efficiently.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. They do that reprogramming aspect is important. And he couldn't do it on himself. So there is a bit of a plot hole there. But I think you've got this inherent sort of ability of these Terminator models to be a bit more than their programming. It does require some intervention in the second film, which hasn't happened in this film as far as we know. So that's a bit more shakier ground, I think. I was really hanging on to that kind of infiltrator aspect. Yeah. But you're right, there's this gap where the characters organically developed a conscience that doesn't quite stand up to reasoning.
But he says that he wants to make a choice as to what he wants to do now. And he's quite, like, he says that quite a bit, doesn't he, as well? Because he wants to help Sarah and try and make up for the fact that he killed John, because now he's got that relationship with this new, like, kid. Yeah. So that's another sort of weird little angle they've got in there as well.
Yes. He's obsessed with this idea of having a purpose. And I think because I like this concept, I do kind of want to jump through the mental hoops to defend it a little bit. Like, I think it might be to do with the purpose of it. So your Terminator in the first film is programmed to kill Sarah Connor. He can't do anything else until that command has been met or overwritten. Terminator in the second one is programmed to protect John Connor, and he can't do anything else until that mission is successful, protect from the T-1000. And then there's some intervention that allows him to do more. So maybe we've got a character here who, maybe these Terminators can always do a little bit more, but there's a very firm, hard-coded bit of programming that is stopping any other action happening. So if you want to do that kind of mental gymnastics to make this make sense, and I do agree with you, it's a bit of a plot hole, but that's kind of how I'd view it. They are capable of a lot more. They are capable of all that learning, but they're restricted by programming in the first.
And I suppose we haven't seen a Terminator which has just been left with no purpose.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it could be this, and it's their world. They can do whatever they
and
want.
they can do what they want. And it's, that was another one of Cameron's ideas as well. He was kind of hung up on that. You've got these two types of Terminator that we've seen, a good one, a bad one, but this one supposedly has free will.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you've got, so he's the good one, the Rev 9's the bad one, and then you've got the in-between, which is Grace, who's the human who has been augmented to have like the strength to fight a Terminator.
Well, I think she's more like Carl. I don't think Carl's necessarily good. Carl is a bit of a... Carl's the one in the middle, but I think he has those similarities with Grace. They have these abilities through their Skynet given or augmentation given strengths, but they have the free will and they decide to join this cause, whereas the Rev 9 is programmed to kill Danny.
Yeah. And I like the, to quote Cameron, the way they've scienced the shit out of it, because they've got, so Grace is augmented, but she's still not quite as strong as a Terminator. And she's still got that weakness about her, that sort of human weakness, because they can make humans have those kind of like abilities, but they're not going to last for too long.
Yeah, that was a good concept. She's got to inject herself with like a cocktail of drugs to pick her back up and get her back on her feet.
Yeah, like something about her metabolism works in a different way. I really like that aspect, because if they just made her as strong as a Terminator, then what's the point in having a good Terminator? Surely everyone would just get augmented and then they'd be fine.
Yeah.
And I also like the bit when Grace is getting x-rayed, and then they're like, how have they put all of this shit in her? And I quite like that, because that realistic aspect of it, because most of the time you're like, this is fine, this is what can happen. But then you really think about it, and you're like, actually, if she's got all of this technology inside her, how is she functioning?
Yeah. And it's a good reaction that they would have.
Yeah.
So you're here to protect her. What are you? Never seen one like you before. Almost human.
I am human. Just enhanced. Increased speed and strength, which means I can rip your throat out if you piss me off, so don't.
So on the topic of AI, and so we just talked about Grace, do you feel like the sort of human synchronization with AI is the only way to like combat this? And is that sort of like what we would move to eventually?
Yeah, it's kind of the other side of the coin from what Cameron's talking about in that book about fearing autonomous killing devices. The other side of that coin is that a better way forward is the ghost in the shell world, where we have these cybernetic bodies, but we're still fundamentally human. I think what this film is saying is that kind of synchronization can be a good thing. It's the creating these autonomous machines with the authority to kill is a very bad thing.
Yeah, don't do it.
And I hope James Cameron's having those conversations with the right people at DARPA or whatever it is to just really draw a line of that. Don't do that.
But then people are going to do it, because there's no, like he says in the book, there's no regulations. There's no one to be like, no, we shouldn't actually be doing that. Or if we're going to do it, we have to have precautions in place.
Yeah, it's worryingly similar to a nuclear arms race, isn't it? Where you just build up the most powerful weapons before the other person builds up.
So with this as well, they've got the older generation of Arnie and Sarah Connor, and they've got the new generation of Grace and Danny. Do you feel like this is going to perpetuate the franchise as well?
No.
No. So you feel like these characters aren't as strong and they can't...
I think they're great. Like, I really like them. I think Grace is amazing.
Yeah.
And Danny has such a good Sarah Connor-like transformation throughout the film, and it works brilliantly for this film. It was just seeing Linda Hamilton back in the franchise alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger just reminds you that that's what these films are about. You can't, the aliens are iconic, great alien characters, but you there's never really going to be a great alien movie that doesn't have Sigourney Weaver in it. Because it's not just the story of the aliens, it's the story of Ellen Ripley interacting with the aliens. And then you see Linda Hamilton on screen and you remember that it's the story of Sarah Connor, and not Emilia Clarke's Sarah Connor, Linda Hamilton's Sarah Connor, Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator, and this more amorphous Skynet or Legion character that sits above that. And that character, because there is no definitive actor that goes alongside Skynet, it's been Arnold, it's been Robert Patrick, it's been other less good actors in shit sequels. It doesn't work. There's nothing there. You can't bring back the Skynet actor and then have another great Terminator film. Do you think that, where do you see the franchise going after this?
See, I'm quite happy for them to just put a pin in it there.
They won't, mate.
They probably won't. Because it's a nice sort of way to round it off. You've got it's the continuation of the last two films. You've got the same two actors. You've got this kind of new thing that's going on, which they're definitely going to use again. But they kill off Grace, don't they, as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, I feel like that, again, that's the Kyle Reese kind of death that you have in the first film.
Yeah.
So it's just a nice way to round it off. And then you've got that bit at the end when you've got the T-800 and the Rev 9 and their bodies are just like skeletal and melted together. And it's kind of like the two generations, two timelines of being defeated and stuff. I don't know. It's just like, I loved seeing them all together.
Well, that's interesting you say that, the timeline's being defeated, because in terms of the franchise, one thing that's very clear about the end of this film is it is the plot of Terminator 1. It's not the plot of Terminator 2. And what I mean is we've saved the girl, but we haven't changed the future. So Terminator 2 is all about destroying Skynet. And that's got some finality to it, and that's why the whole franchise has become really muddied and difficult to make sequels for. This one doesn't have that closure. The future still exists at the end of this film. Danny's going to go on to be the leader. There's a grandfather paradox in that, would Danny necessarily become the leader if she hadn't had the Terminator come back in time and then she met Sarah Connor? So now she's going to become a military leader with training, similar to Kyle Reese going back, becoming the father of Connor. That's all still there. That's a package at the end of the film, isn't it? So if you wanted to make a sequel to this film, it seems the natural next step is, right, we need to go on a mission to defeat Legion before it exists.
And there's always something they have to do to sort of save mankind from fucking themselves over.
Yeah. Well, I don't think they should. I mean, my opinion is they shouldn't make that film.
Yeah.
But it feels a bit inevitable.
Yeah, if you look at it from a marketable standpoint, they're going to be like, oh, we've just got two new great characters. How can we get them back in a film?
Yeah.
Great action stuff. People will buy tickets because they want to find out what's going to happen next or just want to see all the action sequences.
Yeah. I think they want another trilogy out there. I think that's the plan. I think you cannot bring back Arnold Schwarzenegger again. Like you said, we talked about it. It's a leap of faith, isn't it? And there's problems with how he comes back into it and how his character works in this film. I liked it enough to set all that aside. I can't see them doing it again.
Yeah, they won't. I'm sure they can't bring Arnie back again. I mean,
I don't think they will either.
Yeah.
I don't think he wants to do it, but I think that's why another sequel wouldn't work.
Yeah.
As great as it is to see Linda Hamilton back, it's got to be both of them for me.
Yeah, and again, you see, like it's the same sort of scenario as what happened with the Star Wars film, because Force Awakens is the same as the original Star Wars in terms of plot and what happens.
Yeah.
So you're seeing the same thing again with Terminator, but I still love all the little homages and little sort of like nods to the old ones, and again seeing like a rugged Linda Hamilton come back and play the same role. I loved all of those bits about it.
No, me too, definitely. And I'll probably go and see the next one as well. And
It'll happen, it'll happen.
that whole setting up for the next one and then trying to prevent the future creates problems for the characters. And Tim Miller said something interesting about part of the reason they chose to kill John off in that way. It's very brutal. But because you've defeated Skynet, John Connor potentially becomes a bit pathetic because he was destined to be this, super heroic leader of mankind. Because he's saved the future, he's going to grow up to be a really normal guy. Best case scenario, just a normal guy, like with a normal job or whatever.
Yeah.
And that would be quite sad to see. And you see that a bit from what I remember of Terminator 3, right? Because that's like he's a little bit older.
Sad job or something. Is it like a vet or something like that?
Well, yes, I think he is. Yeah, and they take him down a more kind of the nerdier route instead of the kind of badass military leader. They focus more on the John hacking the ATMs aspect of his character, and he's a bit nerdier. And you'd have that same problem with the future of this universe, which is we've got Dani set up now. She is this badass resistance leader. If we do have a sequel where they're planning to defeat Legion, and then you want to do another sequel after that, then what for Dani?
Yeah.
Normal life, fine, maybe, but it's not very compelling as a character, is it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I really like the fact that there was so many strong female characters in this, and I think they did that really well, and that was a good comment on how things are today. The fact that it doesn't have to be John Connor, it can be a really strong female character who is the saviour, like I said previously. And the fact that Grace is...
The new Kyle Reese.
Yeah, the new Kyle Reese. And I loved all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I like that. Like I said, I thought it was a bit on the nose to be saying, it's your womb that's important. I think the film was speaking for itself by having Grace, Dani, and Sarah as these strong, interesting characters. And I don't think it's necessary to be too pointed about it and actually have dialogue that sort of calls attention to the fact that they're women. It was speaking for itself, and like you said, I really liked having those strong women on screen. Could have done without kind of calling attention to it so much in the dialogue.
Would you think they're good role models for young women? These characters.
Sarah's not.
She's a bit messed up, isn't she?
Yeah, and that's what makes her such a good character.
Yeah, all of her backstory stuff as well. Like when they say it's all sort of. She just calls up this random general to get an EMP grenade.
Yeah.
And then there's a guy from the FBI or something who sees her in the jail and is like, we finally got you, Sarah Connor.
And she's had her own episode of America's Most Wanted.
Yeah. Little bits like that, because she's just gone off the rails. She's already trained up to be this this person who can protect John.
Well, what's the assumption there? Is it that because of all these Terminators that she's getting the texts about, she's spent the last 20 years just causing massive destruction because she goes around destroying Terminators?
I think it must be that.
Yeah.
But then obviously she's got this sort of criminal background anyway.
Yeah, just on that, who was sending those other Terminators back? Legion or Skynet?
This was from Skynet, wasn't it? Because this was the previous timeline.
Yeah, so it was sending those Terminators back to a time period after John Connor had died.
In an alternate timeline after Judgment Day.
Yeah, so it's sending them from a timeline where John Connor hadn't been killed. So there's a point where, I got to get this straight. So there's a point where the T1, right, John Connor launches his assault in the future, defeats Skynet. As Skynet is being defeated, it sends back a T-800 to 1984. A T-1000 to 1995, 4 or 5, whatever. And then we find out it's also sent back 10 other Terminators to 1996, 1998, 2002, whatever. It sent back a load.
Yeah.
And it did all that at the same time. It just sent back a batch of Terminators. Is that what's happened?
I think, yes.
Right.
It sounds like that, doesn't it?
Because Carl's monitoring it through some ridiculous timey-wimey bullshit. It's chromatic waves or something.
He doesn't understand this stuff. I don't get it. I'm not a tech guy.
In English, Doc. But he didn't know. He doesn't know because he's a T-800 and he looked around and there were 10 others next to him. He's monitoring it with his super technology.
Yeah. It's that, and didn't he say you get weird, there's time, you feel stuff in the timeline.
So ripple in time, forward and back, yeah.
I mean, who knows?
Silly, very silly. But no, I just had to get that clear. Hang on, we were talking about the female characters. Are they role models? I think Danny is. I think she's a really compelling
And also
character.
something we haven't really touched on is the fact that it's not set in America this time.
Yeah, is it all set in Mexico? It starts in Mexico City.
Yeah.
And
And
they cross the border, don't they? Which is a whole
but the fact
thing.
that she's like a Latin woman as well, in a sort of Trump era where he wants to put a big wall between Mexico and the States, to have a main protagonist who is going to save mankind. She's a woman. She lives in Mexico.
Yeah.
Then that's sort of James Cameron being like, come on now. So do you feel like Tim Miller did a good job with this? Did it live up to the hype?
He did the best damn job he could.
Exactly. And I think like it's a lot to take on. It's big shoes to fill. And obviously those first two films are always going to be iconic, and they're iconic for a reason, because it was that moment in time. To try and recreate that now is a really massive feat.
Yeah. It's one of the best examples of what people call a soft reboot that I've ever seen. You know, where the studio's unwilling to commit to calling it a sequel or a full reboot, and you watch it and it's neither and it's both, and it's a good example of that, in that it's very faithful, but it's also a complete reset button on that plot and creates a whole new universe. And it does all of that quite well, quite efficiently.
Yeah, because they've got enough stuff to keep the diehard fans entertained. They've got the same lines they put in. They've got sort of similar scenes, settings, and that kind of stuff, which I really enjoyed. Like even the bit with the car chase at the beginning, it's very similar to the one they do in Terminator 2 with the motorbike. And they always try and amp it up a level. So yeah, it felt like the sort of passing the torch of the Terminator films a little bit as well, with this new generation, and being like, here's the original group, where we might carry on doing the franchise.
No, I agree. It's a good passing the torch movie. But I think the torch should not be carried any
I feel like the
further.
torch should have gone out.
Yeah. Fine to pass it, but I'm not too interested in where it's carried next.
Yeah. But I think all in all, it's a very entertaining film. It's a good watch, and it's just some fun, isn't it?
Yeah, it was fun. Definitely lots
Yeah.
of fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you, I know we're right at the end of the podcast now, did you notice that Arnie loses his left arm, and he always loses his left arm?
Does he?
Yeah, and I really just noticed it this time, and I think he loses it in Genesis as well.
Yeah.
In the climactic fight, I think he's fighting. There's an awful fight scene at the end of Genesis, too chaotic, where he's fighting the John Connor Terminator, and I think he beats John Connor. No, Kyle Reese shows up, grabs Arnie's severed arm, and then clubs John Connor with it.
Fantastic.
It was stupid. But yeah, I think
It was stupid.
I think he loses his left arm in every Terminator movie that he's in.
Ah, that's a good little fact.
And I liked that when he showed up at the end of the dam and he was missing his arm. I was like, oh, it's gone again.
So if anyone is currently watching all of the Terminators in chronological order,
Yeah, let me know if I'm wrong on that.
yeah, can you just let us know?
No, don't let me know, actually. Just let me know.
No,
if
it's a fact.
Yeah.
It's happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what happened. Well, that's about it for Terminator Dark Fate. Thank you very much for listening. As always, we will be back again next week with a brand new episode of the podcast.
We're back to our AI series next week. Business as usual.
Yes, so make sure you download that. And yes, we will see you then.